I realize that I do have a PhD, and it stands for Passport Heavily Damaged. This has been a lot of places, and this is a record of my extensive research for this lecture. But it's not about places. No, it's about people. People that I've had the privilege of meeting and interacting with and getting to know personally, people who are making bold choices for Christ now. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon a few weeks ago, and knowing that the deadline to be ready for this Saturday afternoon was fast approaching, I went, as I often do, to what I like to call my Tanglewood office. A picnic table under some trees in Tanglewood Park, just down the road from here. I was thinking about what I might share today, but I was distracted by a flock of geese, or more accurately, a skein of geese. They were flying around over the lake in their usual V formation, and there was one goose who seemed to be the leader. The other geese were following fairly faithfully. Sometimes the V looked more like the ones my granddaughter used to make when she was 4. But then the head goose made a slight turn. He or she, my research shows that the leadership is not always an adult male. In fact, the leadership changes periodically. But the head goose evidently saw some reason to change direction, some reason to change course. I'm not sure why. From my perspective, I really couldn't see anything wrong with the direction in which they were already going. The other geese may have felt the same way because, now, it might have been my imagination, but they seemed to hesitate for a moment. But the head goose started honking, and then, sure enough, they followed. I think they followed because they seemed to know that once the head goose breaks up that flow of air coming toward them, then the flying is easier for those who follow. Because the act of going against the flow provides additional lift for the rest of the flock or the skein. But someone has to make that choice and then keep on honking until the others can share in the V. And in my little Mother Goose story, that V stands for vision. Well, I got caught up in this personal object lesson that God seemed to be sharing with me, and my mind drifted back in time to the stories that I've heard, some of them true, about that ancient goose, that medieval Catholic reformer, Master Jan Hus, one of, I would say, the early honkers, one who was willing to go against the flow and then move out of the way so that others could lead the V and carry on the vision. Not necessarily where he would have taken it, but inspired by his honking and by his bold choices. He simply flew against the current flow of his time, or I guess we could say the current of his time. Because that flow changes. The current of Huss's time is not necessarily the current of our time. Does this make any sense at all? So my mind drifted again, this time not back in time, but rather around to many parts of the world. And the many people who have inspired me with their bold choices to go against the flow, go against the current in their time and in their place. Who are these people? What are they like? What inspires them to boldness? For some people, it almost seems like a personality type. Or let me put it this way. Some are born bold. And you see the excerpt from a 3rd grade test there. We laugh. But if you're the teacher of this 3rd grade student who answered that question, you have your hands full. Bold choice people are not always what I would call nice. Whatever it is, or maybe whoever it is that inspires them to step on other people's toes, at some point may inspire them to step on mine. With apologies to Malvolio, I would say that some are born bold, some achieve boldness, and some have boldness thrust upon them. By that I mean that some people find themselves going against a current not of their own choosing. It's been thrust upon them. But I believe that when there are things in the current that need to be addressed, God often seems to raise up bold people for such a time as this. Some of these people are called to make choices in keeping with the description of today's workshop, because they are called to face death and exile boldly and find new ways to witness to Christ in the midst of tragedy. Honduras. I'll put this one first so I can get through it and go on. Has the highest homicide rate in the world, mainly because of drug trafficking, specifically cocaine. There's a new common word in Spanish, narcoviudas, narco widows. You see some of their faces. Photos taken by one of their friends, my wife. In some cases, their husbands are killed because of their involvement in the trade. But in many others, it's because of their refusal to be involved. Funerals have become more commonplace in many Honduran Moravian churches. The church bell tolls regularly, usually because someone has been shot or stabbed. A year or so ago, 17 people were killed at a Moravian graveside service because a fight broke out between competing factions. Sadly, many pastors and leaders are not willing to go against the flow. Why? Because it can be economically more fruitful to simply pray for them and hope that they remember these prayers of blessing when it comes time to tithe and support the church that looks the other way. Supported by the ministry of the Unity Women's Desk, a group of women decided that they had nothing to lose, or really nothing more to lose. So they started meeting together, praying together, studying the Bible together, and then started a small business together, sewing school uniforms to provide a source of income other than drug trafficking. And they started teaching children and young people about the dangers of what was happening all around them. They faced opposition and threats from the drug lords. The January 6, 2014 issue of the New Yorker magazine tells the story of one Miskito woman who was asked to cut down a beautiful tree so that they could lengthen a landing strip to accommodate a larger plane from Colombia. They offered her a sum of money to do this. Not only did she not cut down the tree, she put up a large cross so that there would be even less room. We'll never know what the drug lord's response to that action might have been, because he was killed a few days later by a competing cartel. And yes, many of you know that that Miskito woman was Lorena. Taking a position against cocaine is relatively easy, but taking a stand is definitely a bold choice. What about lobster? I think cocaine is pretty clear, but what about lobster? The other main source of income in La Mosquitia, Honduras, is lobster diving. Because of poor preparation and inadequate equipment, both of these are money-saving measures, many lobster divers end up being paralyzed like the two you see here, or like the one you don't see below, the one in the coffin, who died on a deep dive with insufficient oxygen. The Moravian clinic in Awas will soon have a hyperbaric chamber to deal with these symptoms. The young man on our left in the green t-shirt, with support from some people in the church, not all, is organizing lobster divers and standing up to the companies that exploit them. Money always seems to be a factor, not only when it is being raised to support holy wars, but even nowadays. Money can be an inspiration to boldness, or sometimes money can be the obstacle to boldness. Sometimes boldness means a willingness to stand up to the powers that be on whichever end of the political spectrum those powers might be. In 1997, Armando Rusindo, a young man studying for the Catholic priesthood, but not in agreement with the apparent closeness that that church had with the Cuban government, met some Moravians. He studied Moravian history, wrote a letter to Bob Sawyer asking if he could be a Moravian, and then started hosting Moravian meetings in private homes in Havana. In 1998, he was called in for questioning by the state police. The questioning was really more of a statement: stop meeting. But 17 years later, there are 8 Moravian congregations and about a dozen fellowships in 6 provinces all across the beautiful island of Cuba. And 1 week from tomorrow, on November 15th, I will take part in the dedication of the national headquarters of the Moravian Church in Cuba, fully recognized by the government and the Central Communist Party, and also visit the Juan Amos Comenius Children's Center in Arroyo Naranjo, a marginal and very poor subdivision of Havana. If I can bring it home for a moment, one of the bold choices was made by our provincial elders conference right here, and David Guthrie represented them and agreed a long time before the new policy changes to walk with our Cuban brothers and sisters. And the Armando Rusindo Mission Foundation, founded by Brother Joe sitting back here, right here in Clemens, has supported that work in many ways. In the 1980s, many Moravians fled from Nicaragua during the Sandinista-Contra conflict. Some of them went to Honduras, others came here to the United States. But many of them made the bold choice to stay there. Pastors were often required to submit their sermons to the authorities on Saturday in order to preach them on Sunday. And I actually visited there once and was required to do that, and was kind of hurt that they didn't find anything, offensive in what I was not trying hard enough. But for many of them, this was an opportunity to witness for Christ in the midst of tragedy to people who otherwise probably would never have heard those sermons. Well, the Reverend Cora Antonio provided leadership through some of those difficult times, and a few years ago, she was re-elected PEC president by the Provincial Synod. Well, now she faces another threat. Indigenous Miskito people typically do not have deeds or paperwork for their land. The land has always belonged to them and to their ancestors. But opportunistic cattle ranchers and lumber companies are using legal means in some cases and violent force in other cases to try to take that land from them. Cora recently convened a summit of church and national leaders to address this issue and stand up to the violence. So please keep her and our Nicaraguan sisters and brothers in your prayers. And my sister, Bishop Blair Couch, will be attending the synod there in January and will be offering words of comfort. Well, she will comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, hopefully, at the same time. In Honduras, during that same period in the 80s, the national government was nervous about the communist influences coming across the border from Nicaragua. So the right-wing government in Honduras accused a professor at the Moravian Bible Institute of being a communist. And they sent an undercover agent to be a student. It really could have been a comedy. I mean, it was like everyone knew that this student, just kind of showed up. But again, the professor saw this as an opportunity to witness to Christ. But it was stressful and frustrating to know that he was being evaluated during this time. You see, making bold choices is not a guarantee of smooth sailing. Brother Atwood reminds us that for Zinzendorf, a Christ who was glorified but was not a suffering Christ was a false Christ. And I think the same can be said for martyrs, exiles, and missionaries. If their bold choices lead only to glory and not to some degree of suffering, then I would question their validity. My favorite Atwood quote, though, does not appear in any of his books or writings, and I hope it's okay for me to share it. I once heard him say that he was not impressed by those John Huss wannabes who whine when their fingernails get singed. Favorite quote. Bold choice makers must be prepared to pay the price. We may not face the level of political repercussions that we see in these scenarios, but maybe we too need to be reminded that as Moravians, we follow a lamb, not an elephant or a donkey. And sometimes the price has little to do with the government or the political system in which we live and move and have our being. Sometimes the price is simply that the church is just not ready for this bold choice yet. But some are called to take bold steps of faith. We see that boldness in Sister Ana Maria in Lima, Peru. When the Moravian Church established a mission area in Peru, some people wondered why, since there are countless Protestant, evangelical, Pentecostal, not to mention Roman Catholic groups already established there. But the area of San Juan de Lurigancho in Lima had very few churches. It's what we would call the bad part of town. And Tripp is smiling because he's been there. But in a city of 8.5 million people, that one part of town has over 1 million people. Ana Maria's husband was a police officer in that part of town, but he was killed in the line of duty. Not shot, but hit by a car as he was working as a police officer. Ana Maria chose to stay there with her 2 children and continues to pastor one of the 2 Moravian churches in that district. It's an area where last year during a Sunday evening service, someone was stabbed on the front porch of the house where the church was meeting. But bold choices can often be contextual. Because as I mentioned earlier, the current in one time or place may not be the same as the current in another time or place. So going against the current can mean different things in different times and places. Ana Maria has a new friend, Sister Betsy Miller, who is the president of the northern province of the Moravian Church in North America. Ana and the rest of the members of the board of the Peru mission area made what for them was the bold choice of walking with their sisters and brothers in the northern province. Ana Maria and Betsy disagree on many things. But Ana Maria agrees with the official letter that their board, she's the treasurer, sent to the Northern Province PEC. It says, "While we do not agree with some of the decisions made by your synod, we believe that it is in walking together and working together that we grow and learn from each other as brothers and sisters." So, to be clear and not dance around this, I'm a bishop, we move diagonally, so, we kind of, no, anyway. The Moravian Church in Peru has not changed its perspective concerning specifically homosexuality. And in case anyone might be thinking this, partnering with the Northern Province does not mean any additional financial support for them, but they're willing to work those things and work through those things together. In northern Peru, again, the Moravian Church seems to be a pattern, is working in Chiclayo, but in the worst part of town. It's called Cruz de la Esperanza, which means cross of hope. A beautiful name, but taxi drivers just don't seem to like it. You say Cruz de la Esperanza? No way. Not going there. The church there is pastored by this couple, Walter Calle and Mónica Guerrero. And since they're married, she is technically Mónica Guerrero de Calle. That's interesting because Calle means street, and Guerrero means warrior. So she's Monica, warrior of the street, or street warrior. Sounds like a good Hussite name, I think. It's appropriate because that's where most of their ministry takes place, out in the street. They do Vacation Bible School. Teams have gone from Kernersville and Friedberg to help with that, taking the message to the people. There's another Moravian church in Chiclayo, in a nicer part of town. It's Remanente, and it's spelled with an H, thinking of the Greek word rema, which is a word for word in Greek, so it's a play on the word. They're blessed to have some, I know, not a good hour of the afternoon to throw that one at Helen, I think, but they're blessed to have some wonderful young musicians. They're very comfortable leading praise and worship in their upper room, the second floor apartment that is their church building. But these young folks have to overcome another sort of fear. When they go out into the streets in their part of town, there's no real threat of danger, but there is the threat of rejection. They share their stories with other young people. They boldly bear witness to the power of God's grace in their lives, and they are reaching souls for the Lamb one at a time. We can see this boldness in another one of our mission areas, the one that Helen nominated as present-day Hussite, in the faces of two faithful servants, Mohammed and Safiatu Brima. After the terrible civil war in Sierra Leone, the Brimas, who had been living in Charlotte for the past 30 years, decided to go back. In the early 1980s, the Moravian Church had explored the possibility of starting mission work in Sierra Leone, but at that time, there were many other churches that were well established. During the 10-year war, most of those missionaries left and never returned. So the doors seemed to be opening. The Southern Province, PEC, again, made some bold choices by adapting its ordination policies to fit a current need. Mohammed Brima was ordained as a deacon in the Moravian Church, and he and Sister Safi returned to Sierra Leone, to the village of Luawa Yehun in the Kailan district. At that time, children in that village who completed 6th grade had to travel about 50 kilometers away to continue their schooling. They would have to live with people in the town of Bo and go to school there. This created many problems, especially for the girls, who were often mistreated, made to serve as pretty much slaves for the family, and even in some cases, sexually abused. A high percentage of these young girls would end up pregnant before completing what we would call middle school or junior high. So the Brimas started a school with 1 grade, 7th grade for us. By the end of the first year, there had already been a drastic drop in the pregnancy rate for young girls. So they added a 2nd year, 8th grade, and another group of first-year students joined them. Now there are 3 grades, or forms, as they say, and the government has approved the addition of the senior secondary school. The school has well over 200 students, and about 80% of them are Muslim. Now, I wouldn't normally bother to classify or categorize someone based on their theological perspective. I try not to do that. But Brother Brima would be considered by many to be theologically conservative. And I say this only because I believe it magnifies the boldness of some of the choices that he has made. He asked one of the local imams to serve on the school board. The school lunch program ministers, of course, to all students in need, certainly not just the Christians. And Brother Brima started something called Chrismus, a periodic open conversation or town meeting of Christians and Muslims where topics and issues are discussed. Muhammad's approach to these encounters, which he leads, is to see them as opportunities for bearing witness to the hope that is within him. In his words, showing them Christ, not attacking them with Christianity. And I haven't even mentioned the bold choice of returning after some time spent here in the States in the midst of the ongoing Ebola outbreak and that threat, which, praise God, I heard this morning, since it's been 42 days since there were any additional cases, they're now saying that it's pretty much over for now. Boldness can take on many forms and can be seen in anyone who is open to God's leading. Brother Michael Tesh would tell you, and I have heard him say this in a public gathering, that when he finished high school, barely, to use his word, The idea of going to college was, for many reasons, not a reality. But as that door closed, another one opened, and Michael was willing to walk through it. He was willing to step out of his comfort zone and go to Kenya, where he and his wife Cece and their daughter Blessing are in charge of the Ray of Hope orphanage. In another part of Africa, in Tanzania, there was a time not too long ago, actually, when even though HIV/AIDS was running rampant, the subject itself was still taboo. One pastor with whom I had become very good friends there, and he was able to share this with me, he said, think about that if you're preaching in the U.S., and you would, in the context of your sermon, even though you're quoting someone, you would use the F word as a quote. He said, you won't even quote it. He said, that's how they were with some of these things, even like HIV/AIDS at that point. Well, I'll confess, not these. This is a picture of Tanzanian young people, but another group of Tanzanian young people started going around to churches, putting on quite graphic, dramatic presentations about HIV/AIDS, and in some cases, handing out condoms in church. Drastic situations require drastic measures, they said. And slowly the church was pretty much knocked into realizing the reality of what was happening. The current, which was being taught in some places and rather widely accepted, was that if a man was infected with the virus, he could be cured by having sexual relations with a virgin. The church has played a significant role in going against that current, and the door was opened for the Board of World Missions, likewise ministries, to continue what has been begun by those bold young adults. Albania is considered to be the poorest and probably one of the most atheistic of European countries. But 3 Albanian women, 2 who visited here recently, Vjolka and Dina, came to know Jesus Christ through the efforts of Lutheran and Moravian missionaries. During the communist rule, worship had been forbidden for over 30 years. When that dictatorship fell from power, these women started a church in their homes. And this past summer, over 95 people attended their church camp. In another part of Europe, the church faces other barriers. The Moravian Church, or Jednota Bratrska, in the Czech Republic, after enduring opposition from the outside during the communist period, soon faced internal conflict as the church was divided almost 20 years ago. Division causes separation, sometimes painful separation, separation of the two groups, and even separation within families. Another element of separation was that the more charismatic group was slowly either isolating itself or being isolated from, depending on who you ask, the rest of the worldwide Moravian family. However it happened, they were isolated. Well, steps are being taken, choices are being made to reconnect. And about 225 Czech Moravian young people gathered at a conference in September. About 130 of them stayed an extra day and a half to dig deeper. They learned about the rest of the Moravian world and then spent time praying using 30 prayer cards provided by Sister Patty Garner of the Unity Women's Desk. But then the groups took it a step further. They decided to write letters to the folks for whom they were praying. One of those letters was written to the other Moravian group from whom they have been separated for so long. And hopefully that will be a powerful statement by these young people. One young woman's heart was touched as she prayed for the school in Sierra Leone, and she made the bold choice of giving a gift of $400 to that ministry. And the church in the Czech Republic is trying to heal another separation, the separation of the church from the community. Instead of inviting people in their very secular society to come to church, come to our service, they're going out into the communities and providing services such as senior centers, young mothers clubs, after-school programs, and support groups. But you don't have to have my PhD, passport heavily damaged, to meet people who are making bold choices. Several years ago, Brother Brad Bennett had a vision. A dream of providing a welcoming space for people who, for whatever reason, didn't feel welcomed or comfortable in traditional church settings. A space for them to come and worship. And that's the name of the ministry, Come and Worship. Remember I said that making bold choices means being willing to pay the price for that choice. The price in this choice was that the church was not ready for it yet. The system wasn't sure what to do with it. A similar situation arose with Anthony's plot, Brother Russ May's vision for an intentional missional community. You see, systems, by their very nature, are designed to protect and preserve themselves. I think we would all agree that a good heating system is one that keeps itself together and doesn't break down. I recently read a paper that had nothing to do with the church or with missions or any of the stuff that I normally read. It was called Disruptive Innovation, a new model for public sector services. It was the first two words that caught my attention and made me read this article, disruptive innovation. Even when bold choices are good choices, maybe even the best choice, they still can disrupt the system. When I was in Nepal a few years ago, I made a relatively bold choice, I would say, for a man of my age. I decided to go paragliding. Basically, you run off the side of a mountain wearing a parachute and hope you go up instead of down. My instructions were, when you get to the edge, don't slow down. Well, the system, in this case, my body, was not necessarily in favor of this bold choice. As I approached the edge of the cliff, every fiber of my being, every component of this system was determined to slow down. Now, normally, I'm thankful that my body resists those choices. It's a safer way. The system is designed to preserve and protect itself, or in this case, myself. And that can be the case in the body of Christ, the church. Bold, exciting, even necessary innovations can be disruptive. There was a line in that paper that I read that I thought could be applied to the church. It says, it's critical to understand that the disruptive approach will likely start off worse than the current dominant model, but then improve over time. The current system has had a long time to get its act together, and it can be problematic to assume that an innovation will be efficient and run smoothly right from the start. We can forget sometimes that the status quo was, once upon a time, a bold choice. And the current innovation may need some time and some fine-tuning before it accomplishes its purpose. I'll give you one biblical example. Hey, doing all right. Well, we read in the book, I had coffee before I get, so you can probably. We read in the book of Acts, Fran had decaf, but that's okay. That the early Christians in Jerusalem made a bold choice to live out their faith in community. It was perfect, utopian. No one had any need. Sometimes boldness can be accompanied by blindness. A bold step had been taken, but all of the kinks in the new system had not been worked out. So some parts were slipping through the cracks. The problem is when those parts are people. Those folks in Jerusalem could have said, well, at least most people are being served by the system. All really, except for those Greek-speaking widows, Helen and all of them. Or what if some folks would have said, see, we told you this community thing would never work. But what did they do? They reorganized. They restructured, if you will. They adjusted the current to slowly live into this bold choice they had made. Our most recent synod made relatively bold choices as well. Since the two ministries that I mentioned, Come and Worship and Anthony's Plot, didn't fit neatly into the current system, we had two choices. Change the ministries to fit the system, or change the system to accommodate the ministries. And Synod created a new category of ministries, manna ministries. In other words, what is it? We're still not sure. But that doesn't matter, because this decision, this choice, allows them to grow and develop into what God wants them to be, not into what we think they should be. Another major decision at Synod was the redesignation of the Cornerstone Fund. It was originally designated for buildings, new church starts specifically for building a building. Now it has a broader designation to be used for emerging or developing ministries. I call that putting our money where our motto is. Well, let me bring you back to Tanglewood. As I was leaving my Tanglewood office on that Saturday afternoon, I noticed a car approaching the intersection from my right. We would be arriving at that intersection at about the same time, according to my calculations, but I wasn't concerned because they had a stop sign. The driver of that car made the bold choice to ignore that directive, that stop sign, and pull out right in front of me. Now that choice, while okay, maybe bold, was at best uninformed, or to use Dr. Fudge's phrase, blissfully unaware. Not all bold choices are good choices, and not all bold choices reflect the will of the one we say we are following. And now comes my bold choice for the day, whether or not to show this cartoon, but you can take it. Here's my bold choice cartoon. So let that sink in. So you get the point. Not all bold choices reflect the will of the one we say we are following. So unlike that driver at the intersection, as we seek to make bold choices, we need to be informed. We need to look back and look around before we look ahead. We look back at the stories in Scripture that guide us on our journey. We see Abraham and Sarah and their willingness to take a bold step of faith, to leave something behind in order to attain something that was promised to them ahead. And we see that they embarked on this journey, Genesis 12 says, by stages, one step at a time. And maybe that's a lesson for us, to take small but bold steps. The Eastern District Synod next year is replacing their opening banquet, that's always a big deal, with a time set aside to prepare meals for local food shelters. Gonna be a surprise for a lot of people. No, we're not gonna have this catered banquet. We're gonna have sandwiches while we put together meals for these shelters. I think it's a wonderfully bold baby step. The book of Hebrews tells us that Abraham and Sarah took their bold steps not knowing where they were going. Maybe we need to allow God to surprise us sometimes and not have everything figured out in advance. As we journey forward, we look back to our rich history of bold choices. If I'm driving along the highway in my car, moving forward, looking ahead, if I decide to change lanes or go in a new direction, I better remember to use that rear view mirror. And I know not everyone has gotten that memo, but I hope they will. And if I'm looking back at where I've been, I better make sure to get the whole picture, because that blind spot can be dangerous. I believe that's true when it comes to moving forward in ministry and service. We look back at our history as Moravians and we celebrate August 13th with a love feast or a communion service, and we see all the lovely and meaningful customs and traditions and musical heritage, but watch out for that blind spot. Don't miss the part about the passion that those folks had for reaching souls for the Lamb, or their willingness to step out in faith, even their willingness to fail. You saw earlier what I like to call Craig's list, Craig's list of places where it said withdrawn, all these places. If I would say these are examples of, and I'd start to write F, A, I, what would the last letters be? TH. Faith, not failure. But looking back and looking ahead can be somewhat scary. Not necessarily because we don't want to change. Sister Ruth Burkall has reminded us, some of us, that it's not really change that we fear in our lives and in the church and in our ministries. What we fear is loss. If we look back, we'll be reminded of what we lost when we let go of some things. And if we look ahead, even though we like what we see, we like what God is calling us to do and who God is calling us to be, we realize that in order to get there, we'll have to let go of some things that may mean a lot to us right now. I'll let you decide what those things might be. So where do we start? We start with the truth. But we remember that for us, the truth is not only a concept or an idea or a book. No, the truth is a person. The one who is the way, the truth, and the life, our chief elder, Jesus Christ. So in all of our choices, if I may adapt some words from Master Jan Hus, we seek Christ, we listen to Christ, we teach Christ, we love Christ, we hold on to Christ, and defend Christ and defend Christ's way, which is not necessarily my way, unto death. By unto death, I don't mean the death of the ones who don't agree with me. My death. Think about that, and think about people who have done that and even are doing that. What faith, what love. So the only one missing is the third, faith, love, and I'll let a non-Moravian use that third essential word for us and leave you with something that he said, one that I consider to be a maker of many bold choices. He said, "May your choices reflect your hopes, not your fears." Amen. That's it. There you go. Any questions? Yes, Helen.
You failed to mention, when you were talking about Sierra Leone, the most important thing that they've done, which is the church.
Right. Yeah. And it was a
School, even though it meets that great need,
right.
doesn't meet the need the church does.
And you're exactly right. One of the challenges for me was I'm used to preparing sermons. And so when they said an hour, I said, that's like 3 sermons, and trying to gauge, what do I say and what do I not say, hoping that some of these things would come out in questions. Of course, the church is, for us, obviously that's the focal point of what they're doing, but in terms of a bold choice in that community, I feel like that's what the school has really served. And obviously, bold choices going on in the church day to day. One being when we're over there making us get up at 6 o'clock in the morning for prayer, but that's another story. No, but yes, the church, the school, the community center, the library, and all of these things that they're realizing that it's not just about having some service on Sunday. It's about being a part of the community, even in a community where we're the minority and we don't agree on everything with the other people. It was when Craig was speaking this morning that we agree on a lot of things, and really the only thing we need to do if we want to be evangelistic is introduce you to the Savior. All that other part you seem like you've got. That's what we share. So what do we offer you, and what do we learn from you?
Well, and I think they are making it abundantly clear that all of that feeding and all of that teaching and all of that love is done in the love of Christ.
Fair. Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's what Muhammad said. I always feel funny saying what Muhammad said. Reverend Muhammad said, showing them Christ and not attacking them with Christianity. Yes, Trip.
Anthony's plot is also a worship.
It is, yeah. And yet not confined to a certain set of walls. Yeah. and a lot of activities out in the street, especially with the Hispanic community. Las Posadas coming up and other things like that. Oh, Fran.
I need some help on thinking through as we saw a struggle for truth in our day, and being able to live with controversy and many of the things that we built on this today. Where are the edges that need to be worked on? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, right here in our churches.
Yep. I guess maybe it's an overly simplified answer, but and kind of referring to my predecessor, Brother Bishop Ed Courts, I think he summed it up by adding that third verse on Sing Hallelujah, Praise the Lord, that we would always end, myself included, with the glorious for us the Lamb was slain. And hold it, as long as you can, and then praise Him. And of course, that you can't leave that part out, that if we don't have it, then how in the world could we share it? I mean, if we don't know it, some quote that I saw was, if you're just teaching people about redemption as opposed to introducing them to the Redeemer, then what's the point? Yes, it is for us, but it was painful for me and for many people that it ended there, and he did something about it. He said, but not for us alone. And that's not just mission work, going out into other parts of the world. That's Acts 6 of, who's slipping through the cracks, and where can we be this message of faith and love and hope that we've certainly gotten, but sometimes it stays in here.